A literal war has broken out between the White House and the Federal Reserve, and your wealth is caught in the crossfire. British HODL is back on Bitcoin for Millennials to discuss the chaotic start to 2026. From the Trump administration launching a criminal investigation into Jerome Powell to the US Treasury's plan to seize control of global liquidity, we're witnessing a power struggle that most people aren't even aware of. And stick around as British HODL reveals why he thinks the 4-year cycle is dead, what the new rules of the game are, and why protecting your mind against doom and gloomers is probably the best financial decision that you can make today. All right, let's dive in. British HODL, welcome back to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Thank you very much.
This morning, we saw something which was huge. So this is going to be out on the first day. Now it's Monday. We're recording on Monday. We saw, or late yesterday, we saw Jerome Powell with a very short video statement stating that he follows the law and he doesn't like the criminal charges pressed against him by the Trump administration. How did you view this statement, this video?
With the Trump administration, it seems to be like one step forward for market stability and then 2 steps back. And so this is, we had a large amount of stability come into the market when they did the Venezuela thing. It was super efficient, super quick, 2 hours, done, right? That was very, very stabilizing for markets. And then we wake up to this, and this is incredibly destabilizing to markets, arguably more than if they just started a war in Venezuela, right? Which is quite interesting. So, I don't like this approach. I don't think it's good for America. I do not think that there is a effort to unveil what the Federal Reserve is doing by the Trump administration. Governments are governments, right? I think there is blows being thrown. The Federal Reserve is not doing what the president wants, so the president wants to remind them who's the president. Jerome Powell has quite openly stated that Trump can't really do anything because he can't fire the Federal Reserve. I wonder how many jobs there are. I need to get ChatGPT to look this up. How many positions are there in the U.S., government, including the Federal Reserve, where the president of the United States can't actually fire anybody? I wonder if it's the only one, right? So I think,
but he did appoint him, right? This is what people are using. Is he did appoint him. So how? So yeah, there's this meme of Trump saying, "Oh, Jerome is great. I appointed him," and then what is it? The last term, right? And now you see him say well, who appointed Jerome Powell, right? So it's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's strange, but look, I think that there is, a large amount of uncertainty bred as a result of this. I don't think that's good for markets, but it is what it is. What's interesting is it seems like they want to, really make it look like President Trump was responsible for the interest rate cuts on behalf of the people. He is fighting the Robin Hood fight right now, right? From a perception point of view. I don't know how true that is, but that's certainly the perception. Trump is Robin Hood, and we need to get these rates down. So therefore, I'm willing to do anything instead of, including, looking at filing criminal charges against the Federal Reserve chairman. So, I think it's drama. I think it creates for good TV, but overall, the Federal Reserve typically ends up doing what the president kind of wants after a bunch of time. I actually, this is controversial, but even though I think rates do need to go down, I don't think Jerome Powell's been a terrible Fed chair. I do not. I know there's a lot of MAGA people that just really want to shit on Jerome Powell. But I don't think he's been a terrible Fed chair. I think he's done a decent job, and I know that's going to ruffle some feathers because President Trump said that he's a shit Fed chair. But every president always says that the chairman that doesn't do what they want is a shit Fed chair. That's not new. Mm-hmm. So, look, I think it's drama. I don't think it's a good look, but here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, what I find interesting is that this ambiguity and kind of obfuscation of how they work together or should work together, or conceptually versus practically work together, right? Like just this whole understanding of what is the Federal Reserve, how does it work? Is it actually like it's, told to the people, or is it more nefarious, right? Like I just think it's interesting that, like you said, this is more like a quarrel at the front, but there's so much behind it probably also happening, right? That the general public just doesn't see or might understand. But I agree. Yeah.
I think that the overall theme that you're going to see here is that the U.S. Treasury wants to take over as much of the liquidity role that the Fed has through some kind of behavioral economic model, going into the future. And I think this is the beginning of it. I think what you're going to see is the Treasury do a lot of financial engineering here that most people would have said, oh, it's the Fed's job to do that. But I think that the person that's in charge of the Treasury, Secretary Percent, is really good at doing that financial engineering part. So that's what I think we're going to see. I really think that the Treasury is going to take over a lot of the role here as far as liquidity creation goes. And then the Fed's going to have to figure out like how it basically stays relevant. Look, the world that we're going into, where you've got digital currencies, you've got stable coins, you've got all these things going on. How does the Fed manage that, right? Like, I think this has to be more where you kind of blend the Fed and the Treasury together, and then that is kind of managed like that. So I don't know if there's some kind of secret ritualistic battle going on, but certainly there is a power struggle going on between the Treasury and the Fed here.
Yeah, that's also my understanding, as in the Treasury is under full control of the president and the current administration, and the role of the Fed is kind of ambiguous and not clear, right? So I think taking steps at Powell like this, or also like a few months ago, like last year, Trump fired this lady, I think, from the board, right? And she was like, like we're going to take that to court, etc. And I read some takes on that is actually on purpose, like to take them to court, to have it in a public way, to eventually determine and show that the Federal Reserve is not federal, has no reserves, right? That is just a whole different type of structure than what many.
I think it's a lot more simpler than that. I think that the president wants money printing. The president wants easy money environment, and the Fed is hesitant to give it to the president because the economic data is not supporting the fact that you would need that right now. I think it will come, and I think it has to come, but certainly the Federal Reserve, it doesn't. I mean, what do you want it to do? You want it to lower the rates to, the most it can lower the rates to is like basically the 2-year rate, right? Which is 3.5% right now. Like, that's where we're going to. The Fed is following the 2-year, which is kind of what it always does. And the 2-year interest rate is going down just very slowly. And that's it. I tell you when things are going to accelerate is when they get these banks to start, when they refile these treasuries that they've got, $8 to $10 trillion this year, and they shove them into the bank's balance sheets based on the leverage ratio changes that they've done. And then there's suddenly $8 to $10 trillion worth of demand for these bonds, and the rates collapse as a result of that. That's when the Federal Reserve has the bandwidth to then go and lower the rates.
Well, I think it's exciting to follow, and especially, kind of like a spicy beginning to the year. I think another kind of spicy beginning more in Bitcoin was, and I think you agree with this, the death of the 4-year cycle, right?
It's not dead yet. It's not dead yet. Every time it's dead, they make a new rule up for what needs to happen for it to be dead.
Well, why do you think it's dead?
I think it's dead because we had an all-time high before the last halving. Like, what are we talking about? Like, that was really the first thing for me. And then, of course, you've got the ETFs in place. You haven't had a parabolic run, right? So, we finished the year negative. Like, how many things you want? But I think the final nail in the coffin, until they come up with another nail that you missed, is, we make a new all-time high. And I think we've got to do that. To me, we have to make a new all-time high before touching the 200-week moving average before the next halving, and that would be the 4-year cycle dead. I can't see how you have so much demand, so much incoming demand, and then you have a 4-year cycle. But who knows? We could still go down and touch. If we go down and touch the 200-week moving average and then go up, 4-year cycle boys were right.
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. On-Ramp's multi-institution custody model distributes control access across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 multi-sig quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, just segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while On-Ramp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything that On-Ramp builds. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now On-Ramp is piloting flat, predictable pricing to make best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial products more accessible than ever. Visit onrampbitcoin.com to learn more and sign up with code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. On-Ramp, strength in many, simplicity in one. I think this was a really interesting kind of like battle between just the psychology, just the mental models of a 4-year cycle against the fundamentals and just bigger demand picture, right? Like what you said, I think with ETFs, etc. There's a bigger bid. I don't know if it's perpetual bid, but like there's just a bigger bid.
Yeah, it was until October 10th. So what was interesting in the markets, and one reason why I was like, damn, there's some smart players in this market, is that until October 10th, you had any dip that happened in the market, any amount of dumping of coins on the market was being sucked up. If you remember, Galaxy Digital, dropped 80,000 coins onto the market, and it dipped the price by 3%. That tells you that there is a smart buyer in the market that's buying up things, right? Buying up coins. And then suddenly October 10th happens and the price just plummets. So all of that buying pressure lifted off the market and decided to wait until there was a bottoming out. So smart money knew that something big was going to happen. And it's been accumulating. We've got whales now accumulating faster than ever, and little accounts dumping faster than ever, which, to me is a standard buyer rotation kind of principle, what I was saying a couple of years ago.
So where do you think we are at now? If the 4-year cycle is dead, we have the whales accumulating. I think a lot of just individual holders, like you mentioned, they're capitulating.
Yeah.
It seems like something that happens every cycle, right?
Yeah,
like you do need to study. You need to study, right, to not get shaken out in that sense. But this didn't really seem like this wasn't an 80% drop. This wasn't like a classic 4-year cycle ending type thing. We had October 10, obviously, that probably scared people. But yeah, where are we at then?
I think the 4-year cycle is dead, but I don't think cycles are dead. I don't think cycles are dead when most of your, asset prices and things like that kind of work on liquidity cycles, right? So I don't think the broader cycle is dead. I think Bitcoin's 4-year cycle is dead. And so where are we at? I think we're experiencing a standard 30 to 35% dip mid-cycle. And I think as liquidity starts coming in, and as really the velocity of liquidity increases, I think that's when Bitcoin starts making its move, and that I believe is going to happen sometime this year with how much liquidity is due to come into these markets based on debt refi and interest rates coming down, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, one of the things I have kind of concluded after doing this podcast for 2 years is that we can talk about Bitcoin, but I think talking about why Bitcoin exists, like the reason of existence, right? Why you should own Bitcoin, or at least not own fiat money and traditional assets, is something we should talk about more. And I think even now, the use case for Bitcoin, for individuals and eventually also companies, countries, I think is becoming more and more apparent. But what do you think people are still missing? I saw you had a tweet that said it's not really about Bitcoin. It's about having optionality, and no other asset gives you more.
Yeah, like, firstly, has it been 2 years since you started? I remember you when you started.
Just over. Yeah,
it's crazy. Holy shit! Right, so that's awesome. I think that what people miss about Bitcoin is, like, so for example, I got a friend who's thinking about buying a very large home here in Dubai, right? And he's thinking about it. It's like a $7 million US home, and he's talking about it. And then the next day he was talking about, what if he wants to live somewhere else, for example, right? And that in itself is a really good example of optionality, because if you buy a $7 million home and now you want to move because business opportunity, family, life is better somewhere else, you need to move back to closer to family or whatever it is, there's friction now, right? There's friction because you have to sell that asset. You got to move it. You got to move yourself. So not only do you have the hassle of moving yourself and moving your family and everything else, you now got to deal with selling an asset. And what if nobody wants to buy that asset right now, right? So like living in London, right? So right now, if you've got a $7 million apartment in London, it's taking a little bit longer to sell it than it was maybe 5 years ago. And that's an issue. That's an optionality issue. And so to me, nothing gives me optionality like Bitcoin, because I can choose to be in Dubai, I can choose to be in Zurich, I can choose to be in Singapore, I can choose to be in New York, Miami, anywhere I want, and I have absolute optionality with no threat of being forced to accept the discount in order to get something to move quickly, right? And that's the reality of the situation. You're in real estate anywhere and you want to move quickly, you're offering a discount in order to get that deal done. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's liquid, it's 24/7, it's everywhere in the world at the exact same time. So optionality is extremely important. And then, of course, you've got the people that are worried about governments coming to knock on their door and they're having to run and this, that, and the other, doom and gloom boomers, as I like to call them. And so for them, Bitcoin is the ultimate optionality, because you can just get on a plane with your Bitcoin and disappear. Of course, that might, constitute tax evasion, but that's a whole different conversation. So yeah, Bitcoin is optionality. And really what it's doing is it's taking the earnings, it's taking the physical labor that you have today. You've then converted that into currency, right? And that currency is being stored for you to then spend later on in life. And the problem with traditional assets is you got to get to, let's say you got to get to $500,000 to buy a reasonable house. But while you get and save all the way up to that $500,000, your earnings, the cash that's sitting there, is being devalued. And you don't have that problem with Bitcoin. You can, every single day you get a paycheck, you can buy Bitcoin and start protecting your earned energy. That's what I mean by optionality. And there's no other asset. What else gives you that?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. I think this is only just one aspect of why people should even pay attention to the fact that Bitcoin is an option in the, menu of options you have to either store or grow, or protect your wealth. And that's just one. I have some real estate friends, and we talked about this actually. Like if you buy a home, right? Like the first thing a lot of people do is change the bathroom and the kitchen, and probably something. But that's like the most changed thing when people buy a home. But when you make it to your taste, right, however specific that is, that actually influences the amount of possible buyers of your property. And especially if you have more like a special home somewhere, just the pool of buyers is way smaller, not only in who can afford it, but also whose taste it is, right, or location or whatever. And just that practical idea of the fact that, you can sell a Bitcoin right now to a random person you've never met, and it is also irrelevant who that person is. Right. That's a huge advantage. Not even talking about the scarcity or the fact that it can be your property and stuff like that. So I always think it's kind of mind-blowing that people don't really look past just the standard thing that people have told them to do or to look at, if that makes sense, right? Just,
100%.
This is how you do it, basically.
Yeah, it's 100%. People have confused their own home as an asset for a very long time. To me, that's why I don't own a home, right? I don't own a home anywhere, because when I do that, it will be a consumption item, and then I will, doesn't matter what I spend on it, because it's a consumption item. I'll make it right for me, and I don't really give a shit what it could sell for.
Well, or it's a liability if you view it as an investment.
Absolutely. Yeah. So people really have got their, it's quite interesting, right? Bitcoin has different use cases for different people with different backgrounds, and it's the same asset. Not any other asset can really say that. Like maybe gold, right? Maybe gold can say that for a wide range of people that it can help, but stocks can't really say that. Real estate can't really say that. So yeah, Bitcoin is universal and liquid.
Yeah, that makes me look at another tweet I saw of you, which I think is attached to this. You said, when I was in real estate, most people were buying property because it was the thing to do. When it was the thing to do, they built more to absorb the increase in demand. I think this is interesting in general, right? Like, where did the kind of like commoditization or I don't know, commercialization of real estate come from, and where did the story change from utility, shelter, etc., to investment, grow your wealth? This is with the advent of mortgages, probably.
Well, no. Actually, no. So it wasn't with the advent of mortgages, right? So mortgages have been around since like the 30s or something like that. Mm-hmm. And
well, I mean, applying credit to a different product, right? And then
so it was the securitization of mortgages that then led to massive, increase in people utilizing property as a financial asset. And the securitization process is what drove and continues to drive to this day, all of the liquidity into real estate, and why real estate, it's a $360 trillion asset worldwide. It's because the mortgage and the debt associated with it can be securitized. And the person that was one of the founders of bringing that to market was Larry Fink.
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
It's shocking.
Mm-hmm. So it's so interesting, right? Because I think a lot of people, the last part of your tweet was, what happens when the thing to do becomes Bitcoin, right? Yeah. Panic, you said. It's so interesting, right? Because, and I wonder if you agree, conceptually, I would think this would incentivize to create more homes. Just in general, right? Like, if there is a product that you can make more of, that you can have a credit market for, and then also securitize, have a financialization on top of that, that actually creates the incentive to build a lot, right? Because unless
the people that own you as a politician are the people that own the property. So now,
exactly.
You creating the supply is now shooting your donors in the foot. So you're kind of incentivized to not create the supply.
Well, that's where I wanted to go, right? So
Sorry.
it's but more no. So I love that you picked up on that. I wonder how that is for you, because you also have a certain background in all the things that you did. When you now look back and you see how certain things are being done, and you just realize that a lot of people are doing it because other people are doing it, and these other people are just doing it, again, because other people are doing it. No one is really thinking about, what am I actually doing? What am I participating in, right? Am I an actor? Am I a subject who actually benefits from either my ignorance or my conscious decisions, right? Like, where am I at and what am I playing, basically, right? And that's why I just said what I said. It's like, well, if mortgages are good, if the financialization, right, securitization of mortgages is good, why aren't there more homes, right? And then you have your answer, and then you're at this crossroad again, right, as just a general person, and be like, okay, so there aren't going to be any more homes. What should I do, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's all these. When you look back, it becomes so clear that it is all a scam and a scam in a Ponzi or whatever, 100%. Right? And well, yeah, how do you think through that, or how do you talk?
Well, I learned this. So when I first started, right, I started off in real estate, and my very first recession was 2008. So anything since then is not a recession to me. Like, it's basically we're having a quiet period, because in 2008, anyone who remembers that kind of what happened then, it was like credit stopped moving from day one to day two. Like, credit just stopped moving. It was terrifying. And I was completely unequipped to understand what the hell was going on. And what I learned, biggest lesson that I learned during 2008, was that the demand for the property that I was selling was not the demand for the property I was selling. It was the demand for the credit. And it took me 12 years to continue in business, firstly deal with 2008 and that period, and then continue in business to be able to be in a position to really take advantage of 2020. And that's when I kind of finally, this 12-year journey of after being traumatized by 2008 came to a head, and I actually had a moment to finally truly monetize and capitalize on the lesson that I had learned, that really it's not about the asset. But the fact is that, you know, the supply of property goes up completely in line with the political pressure, right? Whereas the demand for property goes up completely in line with the supply of credit. And so you have these two forces of supply and demand. When my tweet was, what happens when they realize that they actually need to buy Bitcoin, and no amount of politics, no amount of crying, no amount of pressure can actually increase the supply?
Yeah. Well, this is something that has come back to me. I think this supply shock, or at least the the clash between supply and demand, will happen, and I feel like it's kind of slowly getting back on the table. But I wonder what you think. Like, is it slow, or will it actually be, like the meme is, slowly then suddenly?
I think what's going to catch Bitcoiners off guard is the fact that Bitcoiners want this supply shock idea to come from people that have actually been subjugated by the fiat system for 230 years. They want normal people, and this is the beautiful thing about Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners want normal people to actually win, right? And my reality is that normal people don't ever win. Normal people are forever going to be a slave to their dopamine receptors and a slave to their fears, and they're going to do what the system tells them to do. And just when they see that there's a way out and they get into Bitcoin, they're going to be given another toy to play with. Mm-hmm. And that toy is going to take them further away from Bitcoin. And the beautiful thing is, as a Bitcoin hodler, I don't need a normal person to win. I might want a normal person to win. I can desire that. But I don't need a normal person to win, because for the first time ever last year, the top 1% actually has more money than the bottom 99% in the US. And BlackRock and all the institutions are focused on that top 1%. They're not focused on the bottom 99%. So the bottom 99%, again, as I say, Bitcoiners are beautiful, because Bitcoiners, this is why I've always had this internal kind of struggle, because of my background, right? When I meet a pure Bitcoiner with a pure heart and a pure energy and a pure intention, I can't help but look at them and just feel that they're naive. But that's because of the chips that I have on my shoulder. It's because of the upbringing that I went through. It's because of how I have seen assets integrate into the markets. It's how I have seen people behave. It's how I have seen humanity kind of react to opportunities that there are in the markets, that I do not have faith that the average person will do that. Now, what does that mean? That means we probably need less than 10,000 people in the world to start an S-curve. Less than 10,000 people. Right? So then it also makes me wonder, when it comes to my content and things like that, it's like, what's the point? What's the point of me doing this, right? Because if it's less than 10,000 people that actually are going to decide this when this happens, then And the average, you know what the thing that's been pissing me off, like we spoke before this, and I said the only thing that I've been doing is getting angry when it comes to seeing Bitcoiners' reactions on due to market crash. It's like, I knew that there was going to be a rotation at 100,000, right? But I'm very disappointed that the accounts that are selling the fastest are the wallets with the smallest amount of Bitcoin, because those are the people that the Bitcoin ethos is supposed to help. And what you realize is that the people that know how to accumulate money, know how to manage money, know how to keep money safe, they're the ones buying the Bitcoin. Which are kind of, I have two sides to my own energy, because the one side of me, I came in talking to the people that had the money. That was my objective. But at the same time, I kind of threw out Bitcoin, developed this heart somewhere, came from somewhere, this empathy. And you come to realize that, history doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes.
For my European friends that want to buy Bitcoin with ease, check out Relay. I've been a longtime fan and happy to partner up with what I think is the best Bitcoin-only platform for Europeans. They offer a super simple, beginner-friendly app with no distractions and no shitcoins. You can do a quick one-time smash buy or set up automatic purchases when you're stacking regularly. And here's the thing that matters most. Relay is 100% self-custody. Every set you hold is yours. Your keys, your coins. If you want to get started, download the app via my link below or in the description and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, at checkout to get 10% off your fees. A huge shout out to Relay for sponsoring the show. Now let's continue. I feel like Bitcoin is in the face of a lot of people, or at least the problem, like why it exists, is in the face of everyone, right? I mean, when you go to the grocery store and a watermelon is $15 or euros or whatever the item is, and in your mind the number of the price doesn't compute with what you had in your mind what a watermelon or a bread was like 5 or 10 years ago, right? Yeah, something is changing, like something is happening, right? And so I think it's staring people in the face, but actually getting there is just an extremely individual journey in a sense. So you can tell people, you can shout at people, you can do it in different ways, right? But eventually they need to do it themselves. And next to that, there is this reality, and I think you pointed out in a great way, where there are just people that are fucking sharks and understand what this is, that they need to have it, and that it gives them a certain power. And these two things exist at the same time, basically. And I think that is why it's hard, in a sense.
The other issue is that it's very easy to psyop people when they don't have optionality, right? And the way you psyop those people is you tell them that there's a savior coming, and the savior is always some politician. Right? That's how our world works. And so it's quite fascinating to me that the very people that, will tell you that we need a revolution they won't buy Bitcoin, but they want to vote for who the next politician is. Yeah. They believe that the next politician is going to fix it. Yep. And that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world works. Mm-hmm. And when someone has a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world works, they cannot be helped, because you will, as Morpheus says, you will fight to defend the very system that you're trapped by, because you think the politician is the answer. And the reality is the money is the answer, but they'll never, ever let you actually decide that for yourself.
Yeah. 100% agree. This is what I'm saying about anyone who's protesting or still is like Occupy Wall Street or whatever. Like, it is all a LARP if you don't take the energy out of the money that fuels everything that is.
Well, firstly, they don't have the money, right? So there was a great town hall by Chamath years ago, Chamath Palihapitiya, right? And years ago, everyone can still go find it because it's on YouTube. And he said, there's probably 200 people in the world that run the world. And the way to get to the table is to get the money, right? I got to get the fucking money, which is why my mission and my content has always been centered around get to 1 Bitcoin. Because I don't care if you have 0.5 Bitcoin, you are not as important as you think, right? I believe that inflection point is 1 Bitcoin. You can decide what that inflection point is for you, but I thought get to 1 Bitcoin was the most comprehensive way to demonstrate, you know, the importance of having enough of the capital. And people still haven't, I'm talking about Bitcoiners still seem to not have realized that this is a monetary network. It is not a human network. The amount of the coins that you own will dictate something in this world that we live in, and it will be very important for you to have enough coins, which is why I dedicated my whole journey to telling people to get to at least 1 Bitcoin. And yeah, I really don't care about the empanada maker buying Bitcoin. That doesn't do anything for me. I care about my parents, who were immigrants to the United Kingdom, did everything correctly, built a property portfolio, you know, had businesses, raised 2 sons that add value to the UK economy, lived by the law, paid all the taxes, et cetera, and now being rugged for their value that they accumulated. Mm-hmm. That's what I care about. I do not care about the person who, you know, is gonna accept. I don't get excited over an empanada stand maker accepting Bitcoin and then converting it to USDT and liquidating it to pay their costs. Like, what about the people with the energy? And that's what Michael Saylor understands too.
How so?
But because he had the energy. The whole point of Michael Saylor getting involved in Bitcoin is because he had $500 million treasury melting, as he calls it, melting ice cube, and he needed to protect it. And so the people with that energy, that stored energy, with that melting ice cube, are going to need Bitcoin more than anyone else. And that's what Larry Fink understands, which is why BlackRock is focused on the top 1%. They're not focused on the bottom 99.
Mm-hmm. So these let's say 10,000 people that can start the S curve. What do you think? What do you see when you think about that panic or the supply shock? And also maybe how long will this take? Not necessarily as like a prediction of when the supply shock is, more about like, what is your idea around people realizing, you know, I shouldn't own real estate, but I should own Bitcoin. You know, I shouldn't own whatever other assets you can think of, but you should own Bitcoin. Do you think this is? I personally think it's slow, because I think all understanding of traditional assets or how you build wealth is just like a word of mouth type thing. There's not a lot of people that actually took the time to reflect on it. I think it's a slow thing. But then when I think about the absolute scarcity of Bitcoin and HODL waves, etc., obviously it could go really, really fast. But I just wonder what you think. Yeah,
I think it's slow until it's not, right? Because that's how capital really works. Like, everyone was slow to invest in Tesla until they weren't, right? 2019, 2020, Tesla went vertical because suddenly everyone needed Tesla stock. And so I think that's what's going to happen with Bitcoin. You know, and I don't think you ever are going to have the debate of I need to sell my property portfolio to buy Bitcoin. I think what they're going to say is, hey, you want some borrowing on that property portfolio? People say yes, and then they'll take that borrowing and they'll buy Bitcoin with it. I don't think they're going to say, I'm just going to sell all my property. I don't think the top 1% are going to do that. I think normal people will do that, and I think that will probably be good for the world. But I don't think the top 1% are going to do that. They're going to take loans, they're going to take liquidity against existing assets, and they're going to buy Bitcoin with that. That's how the game continues. You don't ever sell assets. You don't sell assets. I don't want to sell my assets. You know, if I'm thinking about other investments or things that I want to do or make, then I'm looking at, okay, how do I generate liquidity against my Bitcoin and get that to happen? I'm not looking at how do I sell Bitcoin to invest in something else. No, I want it all. I want everything to work. And like right now, I can borrow against IBIT, for example, at central bank rates in Switzerland if I want to. But the point is that you've got to have enough capital to get access to those services, which is why for a long time I've been saying you need enough fucking Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, I also agree with that, right? It is that game, and as long as people can play that game, they will play it and not change it for any altruistic reason or signaling or whatever, right?
Why change the game? Just get people mad at the politician and let the game work. That's it. That's how it works. So you just keep people distracted. Every new generation has its own coliseum, right? Shove the people in the coliseum, let them watch the fights, and you get on with how the system works. That's it.
Yeah. I do think last week I talked to Peter Dunworth, and we talked about how the people that are retiring, the boomers that are retiring in an environment where life gets more and more expensive, and like you said, right, how can you even plan for the future if you don't know how much money units you need, right? You can have a plan for XYZ money units, but if it's being devalued all the time, you probably need more than you anticipated. So his idea around that was that either the boomers are going to eat away at the great wealth transfer, the inheritance to their children or their grandchildren just to survive, and that could either be by selling or by playing the game, like you just mentioned, right? But then on paper, someone else is going to be the owner to, let's say, the property or whatever. I wonder if you agree with that outlook. For me, this is why it makes it so much more apparent that you need something like Bitcoin, especially for millennials, because I don't think the great wealth transfer is actually going to be a great wealth transfer. I think it's going to be way less. So you already need to anticipate on that. But what Peter Dunworth also thought, so there's kind of two questions into one, is that the US will start buying Bitcoin for its strategic reserve this year. And I saw you tweeted that as well. So I just want you to reflect on that.
Yeah, I think the U.S. will start buying Bitcoin for its strategic reserve this year. I do see that happening. I've got friends in the Bitcoin Policy Institute in the U.S., and I see the work that they're doing and how hard they're working to get things moving. But it's a look. How do you convince Congress? Right, because it has to be congressional, right? Like, how do you convince Congress that we're going to print a bunch of money and buy Bitcoin instead of print a bunch of money and give it to you so you can buy votes? How do you do that, right? So, or give it to your neighborhood Somalian, right? Like, how the fuck do you convince a politician that that's not the best thing to do? So, look, I do think that starts happening this year. But, on the inheritance side, I don't know, because when you look at AI and what robotics is doing and everything else, things get very cheap here. Deflation could really do some magical things here, right? Now, the interesting thing is that I think we could have price deflation for like day-to-day shit, and at the same time have asset price massive inflation, which is kind of interesting, right? That's really the world that we're kind of stepping into. Because if it, like that watermelon that you said for 15 euros, if you can service the general market with a €5 watermelon, but keep house prices high, the peasants are kind of happy now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, the peasants are happy, the rich people are happy, everyone's kind of happy. So isn't that the path that you would go down if you're a politician? So this is the thing that I don't know yet. I haven't quite figured that out. It's something that I do think about. Like, what happens if you can you keep your Domino's pizza really cheap, right?
If deflation is inevitable because AI, well, maybe even like runaway infinite, everything is being copied, and, multi-abundance creation, whatever AI is just a certain path, which it looks like it is. You still have this issue of deflation is bad in a debt-based monetary system, right? So if you want to give the plebs, like you said, cheaper watermelons, a robot house made and robot garbage truck and all that stuff, right? How are you going to hide the bomb that is under there? Which is, I think, what you're saying now is just in the assets. Does that make sense or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the plan. I think the plan is you have Bitcoin there. Bitcoin's a perfect asset because house prices can still stay kind of reasonable. Yeah. I definitely, think that. Like, I think Bitcoin's such a wonderful asset because, look, how many people are going to be complaining about being homeless because Bitcoin's at $20 million a coin? Zero. right? And this was the problem with using real estate, because real estate comes with social consequences, as we've seen, like 2008, for example. Whereas with Bitcoin, you can start the engines, put your foot on the fucking accelerator when it comes to credit creation, and just never, ever lift it off, because nobody cares. It's just another thing. In fact, the less important Bitcoin is for retail, the better it is for, you know, the how the system works. And that's why I said, give the retail the Coliseum, whether it's shit coins or 24-hour trading or whatever else. Let them all focus on all that stuff, and you just sit there and you just keep piling onto Bitcoin. I definitely think, you know, that's kind of the path that we're going to go down.
Makes scary sense, actually. Right, because there aren't any other options really. I think Peter mentioned also to me, well, another option is like war, right, like debt jubilee type stuff, but the US doesn't really have money for
we kind of had a debt jubilee in 08, right?
Yeah, okay, but then there's other people that say, well, that never really got cleaned out.
Well, then we had another one in 2020.
Well, is it cleaned out, you think?
Well, we'll have another one at some point.
Well, yeah, that's the yeah, exactly
down the road, right? You just keep kicking the can down the road. Like that's what you do when you have a ton of debt. And again, the U.S. is now doing, you know, nation building exercises around the world. So they're going to find more and more markets. They've basically destroyed the idea of BRICS at this point. You know, when they can send in 20, you know, members of Delta Force and take a president of a country that was being defended by Russian and Chinese defense weaponry. It's like, and they did that in 2 hours from landing or from entering airspace. That demonstrates to you, they've demonstrated a lot of things in the last, there's a lot of geopolitics going on right now.
Mm. Yeah, I think this year, I've always thought that the 2020s are like the roaring 20s, but it feels like the next half is actually going to showcase that. And I was just wondering, like, what makes you most bullish, or what is the thing, maybe rephrase, but like, what is the thing that you're watching the most? Something to change, something to happen where you get certain confirmations in your thesis?
I mean, absolutely nothing, right? At this point, I knew the moment BlackRock, and this is when my content, you know, I put my foot on the accelerator on content. As soon as BlackRock filed that ETF application, I was like, okay, this is the game. And a lot of things that I said were going to happen have happened. And it's been wonderful to watch. And I also have been known to say that, you know, that ETF, the BlackRock ETF, is the single most important date for Bitcoin, you know, since the inception of Bitcoin. And I still think that's true. I think the game is the same always, which is cause a bunch of havoc, print a bunch of money, let the system inflate, then calm it down, wait a bunch of years, and then do the same thing over and over again. I think that system is going to be in play. You've now got the added benefits of AI and robots. What that means, you know, from an overall geopolitical perspective, like the strategy of importing a bunch of immigrants to fill up a declining population now kind of doesn't need to happen, right? Because you've got GDP, because you can add GDP through robots and AI. So now you look at it and you go, if you're a smart Western country that was going down this path of importing migrants to fill up the declining birth rate, maybe you send them all back, right? Maybe you just have a country for your own people that's way more efficient because of AI and robots. And I think the first Western country that kind of does that is probably going to be the winner. And there's going to be one country, I think it's the US over there. I think it's going to be someone in Europe. I haven't quite figured out which one of the big ones it will be. And that's what's going to happen, right? So now you have a very efficient country. GDP starts skyrocketing. Productivity goes through the roof. You can now compete on labor costs with the East. And now the West is back in the game, and you can just continue, you know, your debt to GDP ratio goes down, so you can push the game out, you know, as far as you want, really. Yeah. So I think we're entering a really good period here. But the problem is like, Andrew Tate, actually, I love this quote where he says it's going to be a world of have-nots and have-yachts. And I kind of I can't see any other reality where that's not true, because I think the average person is going to live a good life because deflation is going to take care of that. The Domino's pizza and the apples that you eat will be super cheap.
Yeah.
And I think the people that have assets and are wealthy and will figure that out are going to be really well off. And they'll just stay far away from each other. And you will see a world where the have-nots will have a good life, and they'll just pretend that they had a dream ever of being a have-yacht.
You just said, you see this happening. What are challenges you see on the horizon? Like, is there anything, that the other side of this question, like what could happen that would throw you off a bit?
Yeah, I think that if we saw reversal in the fact that, look, owning Bitcoin at this point is basically a stupidity test, right? You've got the C-suite of Wall Street, you've got the C-suite of the U.S. government, C-suite of every government worldwide, all getting behind this asset. And if your argument is, should I own any, you're basically an idiot, right? Like, there's no question about that. The correct question is, how much of this do I put in my portfolio? And that's a monumental tectonic shift that happened last year. It went from a should I own this to a how much of this do I need to own, right? That's a massive shift in a $900 trillion capital-sized worldwide liquidity pool. So a lot of things have moved in Bitcoin's favor. The only thing that would make me go, okay, what's going on here, is if we started to see a reversal in that. And the fact that BlackRock's in the game, I don't think that happens. So I think the game is won now for Bitcoin.
All right. As a last question, what is the biggest antidote to the doom and gloom people?
I think that I said this on, I just did Grant Cardone's podcast, and I said it on his podcast. I've never met a doom and gloom boomer that's actually a happy person in their life. Like, and also I've never met a true doom and gloom boomer that's richer than me. And so, I don't know what the answer. I think that there is something to do with something dark, something twisted, something that's unsatisfying about it. I'm just going through the list of doom and gloom boomers that I know and the stories that I've heard about their personal life in my head, and I'm just like, they're not doom and gloom boomers. These people want to believe in the future. The problem is life has thrown them things and just complete, utter blackness and sadness that life has thrown them that drives them to one perspective on the future, which is it must all be torn down in order to get the utopia that we want. And I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for every doom and gloom boomer, because Bitcoin is, especially in Bitcoin, because it's like you've got such a positive asset. You've got such a perfect store of value. You've got such, an amazing tool here that takes care of people, whether you've got a small amount of money or a large amount of money. It's going to take care of you and protect your energy and take care of your family and everything else. So, it's, I don't know. They've got something dark within them. And I used to be in the gold and silver space, and I met enough of them there. And, now I'm seeing them in Bitcoin as well, and I find it really sad. And they always try and mask it as some kind of positive spin. And the reality is, if nobody super successful has ever met someone who just constantly sits there in negativity and then has a good life. In order to maintain positivity, you have to violently protect it, because the world wants to drag you into this darkness, this doom and gloom boomer bullshit every single day with every single thing out there. So my attitude towards these people is I want to push you as hard as I can away from me so you don't even try talking to me. It's a violent protection of the positivity that goes on between my ears and the perspective that I see for my family, for my friends, for the people that I care about, and for the people that I choose to be responsible for. But I've had this experience where I've had to basically talk to friends and say, right, this person is not conducive for our group, right? And we've got to excommunicate them from that, because I will do everything I can to violently protect the positivity from within which I choose to see the world. And the moment I come across doom and gloom boomers, they're just sad, angry people. And I want to stay away from them.
I think that's great advice to end this conversation with. So I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, let's see what the year brings, man. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.